Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Carl Schmitt's Dictatorship. This is part two of 1A, book one, which dealt with the question of let's just get the title of this. Uh, no, book one dealing with what is the title called? Come on, I have a dictatorship here. Why is it doing this? Okay. The commissarial dictatorship and state theory, right? This is that whole point, which A deals with the state theory and the technical aspect of it. In other words, state theory based on a technical aspect and constitutional state theory, right? This aspect. And in the first half, we did until page 9, where I would break up, and we'll continue because it's a long passage. This is going to go from today. We're going to go from one. We're going to go 10 pages on this, and I hope to get this done for today because the next part B, deals with Baton. It's the definition of commissary dictatorship in Baton. This is basically Baton is 1640, so 17th century. So the beginning of the 17th century development of the state theory and the commissarial dictatorship. Okay, is how he develops it. So let's go back here to this thing where we left off. This orientation of dictatorship, orientation consisting of three constituent elements of rationalism, three elements of rationalism, technicality, and the executive, is at the origin of the modern state. So therefore, this orientation of the older system of the commissarial and the sovereign dictatorship becomes this idea of this dictatorship of this post kind of early modern period becomes this basis of the three elements of rationalism, of technicality, and executive, which has these developed so far, right? The word dictatorship is used here to designate a kind of commandment that, by definition, is not dependent upon any agreement or insight of the party being addressed, and does not wait for his or her acceptance. Historically, the modern state emerged from some kind of, in other words, the modern state emerged from some kind of political technology or expertise. Now, this is from German, how it's expressed here. This kind of modern state emerged from some kind of political technology expertise. The idea of the modern state emerged in the 16th and 17th century as this entity from administration, this technique, from Machiavelli's technique, and then later improved by Baton and Hobbes, right? It begins with the theoretical reflex, the doctrinal relation to the reason of state, or Staat reason, or reason of state, right? Reason to Staat reason, or reason of state. Now, okay, that is to a socio-political maxim that stands above the dual legality, illegality, and is derived only from the necessity of the assertion and the extension of political power. This idea, this is the difference. This is the move from politics to reason of state. This is something like Botaro, the Italian writer, I think, in his classic little book on reason of state, gets this idea. Though he's supposed to be anti-Machiavellian, he's basically he nevertheless embraces with Machiavelli's concepts. This is what's his name? Come on, Virilli, Mario Virilli's book, a famous book, From Politics to Reason of State. The language just changed this period. In other words, the modern, pre-modern world, with Machiavelli being that turning point, the language of things, when we talked about the language of politics, the political, now we move to the reason of state, right? And by the 16th, by the 17th and 18th century, you go in the 19th century, you go to this, the language of reason of state. And this is what Schmitt is kind of pointing out to. In other words, it begins with theoretical reflex, the doctrine related to the reason of state. That is, to a sociological political maxim that stands above the dualism. In other words, no longer about legality and illegality, justice or injustice. It's what? It is derived only from the necessities of the assertion and extension of political power. How to get power, how to do it. Again, this is tied to Machiavelli's Prince about achieving and maintaining of power, right? This is of this technicality of this. The military and bureaucratically trained officialdom and executives are the kernel of this state, which is essentially executive. Executive. Again, this is what I would, and this is why Harvey Mansfield's Taming of the Prince is, in many ways, kind of follows what Schmitt is talking about here in that sense. About how Machiavelli, moving from Machiavelli's princely state to the federalist of modern state, executive of the modern state. This is this training of it, tempering of it. This is what he says here. This is the kernel of the state, which is essentially executive. From a technical point of view, the executive can be indifferent as to the authority in whose service he's employed. The trained functionaries could easily offer their service from one state to another, and the particularly useful commissars of the German princes were foreigners, because the rules of efficient functioning are independent of the legal peculiarities of the employer. They are based on the social practical experience, stock technique. Wonderful German. The stock technique. So based on a social practical experience, stock technique. The vast literature on raison d'etat, reason of state, and again, this is, stop here, let's go 19. This is Ferrari's History of Reason of State, 1819, French book, right? But we can look at Reason of State also in like someone like Varelli's From Politics, Reason of State, or someone like even Menke's book Machiavellianism, saying tracks this out as well. Would be useful here in that sense. The vast literature on raison d'etat, ranging from Machiavelli and Guardini to Batero, Scipiculus, Bocellini, Baccalini, and right up to the climax achieved by Paolo Scarpi, who reveals the pure consequences of the political practice. Consequences of the political practice of power, and in its technicality, demonstrates in reality only the factually valid conception of law, which could become a real power because it is part of the concrete situation, even if the sacrality of law is revealed. In other words, this is an interesting word. The sacredness of law, right? I think this is this. This is religious symbolic, the state or quality of being holy, of sacred. So the sacredness of law is revealed, even if that, in other words, that this idea of this reason of state power, the consequences of political power in its technicality of doing this, is it because it reality only factually valid concepts of law for which could become a real power because of the situation, the concrete situation. This only become law because the concrete situation, the fact of the moment, the reality of the situation necessitates this, and that's why it's law. Not that it's law from a higher principle or something like this. It's law because it's a fact that needs to be addressed. And even if there is the sacredness of law is revered, at least German authors are clear about the methodological difference and talk about the different points of view. Sophocles, this is I can't say Sophocles, 1576 to 1469, has clearly separated morality from politics in his 1613 Padilla, right? Padilla Politis. Again, I think this is Latin. Let's see if I'm right. It's political studies, right? That's just what it means. Political studies. His political studies. The former provides principles for what ought to be, whereas the latter provides a practa prinsa, praesimpsa, I can never say precepts. So from principles, the former gives us studies, political studies, gives us what the principles. In other words, morality and politics. Morality gives us principles. Politics gives us precepts that are based on the laws of concrete existence as just medicine. So therefore, this idea is that okay, moral gives us principles, politics gives us precepts like medicine. So the certain things that we have to react to. It's the concrete, the real and the concrete, not what ought to be. The is versus the ought, right? But a general significance, but of greater significance, not general, by greater significance than the vague ideas of reason of Staat and the public, the salus public, the public health, public well-being, which has been easily moralized from the position of a certain understanding of the state, is the concept of the political anarchium, the political secret, which we find at the center of this kind of political literature. This idea of reason of Staat means the secret, the political secret, the archeum, the special knowledge, and therefore this is this idea that this reason of state usually deals with the secret, that some information or something that is essential that could, its information could harm it, right? The archaea, the arcane. The scholar who has a scholar who has analyzed the social and administrative constellations and understanding of absolutism with the unusual meticulousness and clarity observed that at the end of the 15th century, when the power of theology is exhausted, and the patriarchal understanding of the origins of kingship no longer satisfied people's appetite for science, politics started to develop a science built on a kind of secret teaching around the almost mystical ratio sanctus, the mystical ratio sanctus, reason of state or reason of state. Thanks. 20. Again, this is Walter's book on okay. On the theoretical justification of absolutism in the of the 17th century commitment of Schmitt. So, but the concept of the political and the diplomatic arcanum, when this word means state secret, again 21, the idea of political outcome and state secret, is neither more or less mystical than the modern concept of the secret know-how of a business. Okay, this is this word. This is secret. Trade secret of a trade secret, right? Which eventually transcends the sphere of sober utility whenever the struggle for control over a committee governing that business has been flamed with it. When the concept steps out of the sphere of plain utility and is seen as, in many ways, a matter of worldview. In other words, these technical things then move out of the plane of just technical things, but becomes now instead it leaves this the plane of utility, and is now presented a thing of as worldview. The simple technical meaning of the word arcanum is illustrated by Michel Bonos from Gotha, 22, right? This is this book, right? State Archive. Who, during the 30-Year War, sent Lord Maximilian von Baer a list of archaea of war, the Kriegsarchaea. He claimed to be able to implement for establishment an instrument by which one could shoot bullets without gunpowder, and other useful Strategia Belli, strategies of war, and Waffen der Kriegspraxis Milieu, or any more military tricks. This example, taken from practice of politics and military life, shows the technical sense of archaism in its simplicity. It's a secret of fabrication. It is a secret of fabrication. In other words, this is all these technical archaism and like this. This is fabrication. It is a secret of fabrication. Now it continues. He goes, the most important example of the archaea literature is the book by Arnold Klepper, 1574 to 1604. Again, this is pointing to the book, which had been cited in 17th century as a standard work. It is in it the issue is analyzed with care and detail by the methodological aspects. With respect to the phrase arcana imperial, or secrets of powers or secrets of state, which Tacitus uses in his Annals, Book 1, Chapter 2, to describe the clever politics of Tiberius, a passage that was highlighted especially by the Tacitus experts and devotee Justus Lipsus. This authority says, to begin with, the very scientific discipline, theology, jurisprudence, business, finance, and the art of warriors or medicine, has its arcana and secrets, or inner secrets. In all these disciplines, we find certain tricks. They employ even cunning and betrayal in order to achieve their goals. But in the state, certain events are always necessary that conjure the impression of freedom, sacrilia, or decorative occasions designed to pacify the population. This phrase is used 300 years later by Anton Meagher, the new Statler, right? Also to distinguish from the real or from apparent reason. The less he thinks about the connection between the archaea with archaean literature, and the more illuminating it would be to compare the political technical understandings of state with the socialist conception of superstructure, which became dominant in various theories of 19th century for all political direction. There was a superstructure. So therefore, this is the archaea, this arcane knowledge. I'm lost for a second. So let's continue with this. In Arcane, there's a distinction between the Arcane Imperii and the Arcanus Dominicus, the secret of ruling. Okay, now let's go up here. Now, sorry, this is pacified populations. The Arcana Republica, the secrets of the Republic, are in contrast to the obvious motives that appear from the outside. The inner forces of the state. So the Republic, Archaea Republica, the secrets of the Republic, are in contrast to the obvious motives that appear from the outside. In other words, the inner forces of the state. According to the understanding that was common at the time, these are not some social and economic forces above the person. No, the motor of global history, world, Weltanschauung, world spirit, is the interest of the prince and of his secret council, a careful prepared plan of those who govern and seek to maintain both themselves and the state, a plan whereby the power of the governors, the common good, and the public order and security are one and the same in a natural way. Diakonos, Book 1, Chapter 5. In the Arcana, there is a distinction between the Arcana Imperia, the arcana power, and the arcana dominicis, that of the secrets of rulership. This is the arcana of power, imperia, and the arcane of domination, the secrets of rulership, and the latter concerns the state as such. This rulership is that of the state, statecraft, right? We call it statecraft today. That is, the actual factual existing conditions of power in normal times. Implicit in the archaea imperia are different methods of keeping people pacified, in conformity with the different forms of political government, monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. For example, under monarchy or aristocracy, a certain participation in political institutions was granted, namely freedom of speech in the press, volume 4, chapter 11. Volume 6, sorry, chapter 11, which allowed some noise but was politically insignificant form of participation in affairs. Furthermore, a very wise tolerance towards human vanity was allowed, and the like. The entire catalog, inspired by Machiavelli, of recipes of what you have to do to say and stay and remain in political power, was not absent. Nor was the imagination of the people conceived as of a large, colorful beast. In other words, nor was the imagination of people conceived of as a large, colorful beast that needs to be handled through various techniques. On the other hand, the archaea dominate dominations, that is, secrets of rulership, are concerned with the secrets and defenses of rulers in extraordinary events, rebellions, and revolutions, and the means by which these events can be dealt with. Okay, this is 25. People in revolt must be promised anything. Later on, one can withdraw one's promise. Populo triumpa es. This is rather than inviting danger in the republic, it's preferable to promise wantonly to the menacing populace in revolt, or to grant demands that go against good habits. For these can be withdrawn later on when the partices had been sated. This is Klepper. The conclusions of in Europe. This is Klapper, Francis Rosellos, and Wolfgang Heinrich Ruprecht. Conclusion of the public law, right? Of public law. This statement, which generally expressed the overall practices of class struggle, right, of is likely to have received this formulation from Justus Lipsius, his politicum of the civil doctrine of law in the sixth. Okay, let me just go Latin. I'm sorry if I'm doing this. Probably slowing me down. My Latin is very rusty, so please forgive me. There are 6 books of political or civil doctrine that go to the prince, right? Oops. Prince is what is this? Okay, next. I should have checked because this is what I hate about this. I really wish I was using the book PDF. I apologize. They look the most the things that the prince that they look to. It's book 6, right? Lie rather than killing, right? This is that whole line. Lie rather than killing. Uh, it is especially stated, however, that there cannot be a great difference between the two types of arcana, as long as the state cannot be in good order if the prince or the ruling party is not in the good order if the prince or the ruling party is not in good order as well. Book 3, chapter 1. So therefore, as it stated, that there's no difference between these two. If either this state nor cannot be in good order, or the prince or ruling party is not in good order. Dictatorship, in particular, is described as a specific arcanum dominationis of the aristocracy. Its purpose is to create an institution that frightens the people into believing that it constitutes an authority against which there's no possibility of provocation. Nevertheless, in the interest of the aristocracy, one has to be careful that the dictatorship does not transform into a principate, right? again, this is 26. This is that the creation of the Roman dictator after the law, passing the law of appeal, appears to possess the first-class understanding of the secret of aristocratic rule, the clamper or the archives. But there are more distinctions that can be found. In some instances, the arcanist dominationists understood as the necessary means of any government of state are to be distinguished from the phlegia dominatus, the curses of rulership. In other words, these are the phlegita dominant, the curses of this, right? This is the things that, okay, we have to distinguish between the things we have to do versus the bad things that happen because of this. From the Consilia Machiavelliscia, the Machiavellian devices, from the abuses of power for tyrannies, from the Clavita Regio Dictator, the bad reasons of state. This is Book 5, Chapter 1 of the Arcana. So again, we have to distinguish between the traditional strategy, the technical, the things of we have to do of rulership, versus the curses of rulership, the bad things that happen, the things that are okay, bad, the Machiavellian devices, the abuses of power, the tyrannies, right? Moreover, the two types of arcana are conceptually opposed to the Ugura Imperii, the rights or legal prerogatives of the power of state. The Jura Imperii, the rights, the justice of power, of the power of, in other words, the legal prerogatives of power of the state, or of the legal prerogatives of the state, and the Jura Dominatus, the legal, the rights, us, ius, the Jura, the rights or law prerogatives of the rulership. Again, this is 27. This is Clifford. He goes that public law says the same as politics, but this is false and runs against Aristotle's opinion, right? This is the idea that public law says the same as politics, but no, it's that regime, the law is always relative to the regime in Aristotle. Okay, this is why the political is higher than the law. The law is always going to be shaped by the law, not the law. This is not the same. In that sense, I think he's maybe reading this correctly in that sense. Okay, the jura imperia are the distinct rights of sovereign to pass law, a characteristics of the summa imperia, the highest power, imperium, the summa imperium, the highest power. And they have been listed since Baton. They are the very fundamenta of the arcana, and they are the same in every state. In other words, this is true, but every state, this is universal. The arcana have to change according to the actual situation, but the jura, the justice, cannot be delegated in the way the arcana can. The jura are finite, the justice, the principles in this, the right of things. This is the crucial difference. Right, proper, fast, right, fast, proper, and in conspicio, in full view, whereas the arcana are secret plans and practices with the help of which the arcana jura imperia should be maintained. In other words, therefore, the us are open. They're private. In other words, they're not private. They're open, observable. In other words, they're inconspicuous, in full view. The us imperia are in full view. However, the arcana are concealed. They're hidden. Therefore, these things must serve these things, and that these things to help to are there to guide. Are guided. Are there to achieve these things. The things that are here, but these are public. These are there. Which help with the parent should be maintained, right? They maintain them. In other words, the arcades are secret plans, which these things should be maintained. These things maintain these things. Okay? The jura dominatus, Klepper, means public right of exception, which basically should be that whoever is in command is allowed to deviate from the common law, us communia, the common law, the common justice, the us that is common, right? In a case of emergency, and the interests of the maintenance of the state and the public tranquility and security, tranquillis pax et quitis. War and uproar are the two most significant cases where, okay, this is what I see from tranquility and public security, right? This is, hold on, this, I apologize, this is going to be longer than I thought it would be because of my tranquility and peace and quiet, right? This is, war and uproar are the two most significant cases where this right is put in practice. This idea of this dominus urus dominaris. This is an exception of the us commana, and that therefore its purpose is tranquillitas pax and quiet, peace and quiet, tranquility, peace and quiet. War and uproar, or riot, or civil disorder, war, are the most significant cases where this right is put in practice. This usura dementis, domination. This. Yeah, the rights of domination, right? Rights of rulers. Rulership. Dominate, the one who rules and dominates. It has a right of exception, a us speciale, special right, a special justice, in contrast to the normal right of the sovereign, which is a us general, a general right. Not general law, general right. Here, dictatorship is just mentioned in general reference without being explicitly named. This is the following quotation from the De Arcana, Book 4, Chapter 8 and 3, contain a reference to Book 2 of Livius History. In the time of riot, the law must be placed in one man's hand. One must stir all the controls with one hand, where the manus designates the actual force, and the executive power is in opposition to justice, right? To us. In the view of the whole context, this passage can only refer to Livy 2, Book 2, paragraph 31, the dictatorship of Aurelius in 494 BC. Clapper and his contemporaries prefer to talk of civil upheaval rather than of war. But this passage in Livy shows us that originally the dictator was only a commander-in-chief of the army, and that the dictator should not be used for domestic purposes. Right? The difference between the ordinary and the extraordinary right of sovereignty, which Bisold also adopted. Now, this is 29. This is Klappner talking about also secrets of blood practice, post-humanist, and the origins of success and of okay, let's do this. This is Latin, so this is the post-humanist treatise on the origin and succession of various changes of the Roman Empire, right? The definition of the rights of rulers as an exceptional right can be already found in Bertus de Pont. Okay, again, this is it's published in Germany, but and in Latin. This is the father of international law. The absolute powers of the king. Oh, in that sense. So again, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary right of sovereignty, which Behold also adopted, rests on the understanding that the sovereign is bound by the rules of the universal human and natural law. So therefore, the sovereign itself is bound by these universal human rules, right? The right of exception should only be subject to divine right. In other words, the right of exception should only be subject to divine right. It is superior to all legal limitations. So the only one is divine right. It is in the plenitude of powers of the state best revealed. It is in it, it is, this exception, in it is the plenitude of powers of the state best. In other words, the powers, the plenitude, the multitude of powers, the various powers of the state is best revealed in the exception. Right? Clampard does not discuss the concept of plenitude posteris. Okay, this is going to be what? A full power, right? Fullness of power. Omnipotence is on German is Machtvollkommenheit. He calls the state of exception something of a legitimate tyranny. Book 4, chapter 2. In fact, this is a matter of again full power, titulus potent power, full power. This conception does not designate a register of rights reserved for the Kaiser. It was understood as was understood in the later constitutional law of the German Reich, where it was simply a semblance of sovereignty. Right, this is an image of majesty, semblance of sovereignty. Semicolon 30. The distinction between rights of sovereignty, the us majesty, and the mere illusion of sovereignty, the sacra majesty, which can be left to the German emperor without concern, can be found in Hippodamus and Lepe. Okay, this is that. It's a Latin title, so let's go look at this. It's on the nature of the state in our Roman and Germanic Empire, right? Okay. So therefore, this idea, right? He says that the concept does not register as registration of rights reserved for the rights of the Kaiser, register of rights reserved for the Kaiser, as under the later constitutional thing of the German Reich, of therefore the substance of sovereignty, right? But it refers in principle to the legally unlimited exercise of power, the first one, right? The plenitento potestas. This it refers to, in principle, to the legally unlimited exercise of power that was entitled to intervene in the existing order of law and in the existing functions and acquired rights. So this extraordinary, this is the moment of the exception in the sense. It is above the ordinary constituted force. The constituting force, the Gewalt, and contains in itself power, Macht, right? And it operates in most cases like the omnipotence. In other words, and it operates in most cases like the omnipotence of the consulting. Okay, this is of the modern state, the consulting power. If I'm correct, I think it is. What is it? Established power. The established power in the modern state, that it is limited to this, that it is limited to the state of exception has no positive meaning, because this is only a limitation derived from legally grounded principles of justice. From a juridical point of view, it is only relevant whenever a state of exception arises. The one who is in full command has to decide for himself. That was the constitutional concept, the Staatsrechtliche concept, with the help of which it was possible to abolish the lawful medieval state, the Riksdag, and its hereditary of offices based on acquired laws. Therefore, this constitutional state could remove the lawful medieval state, right? In other words, it was this constitutional concept with the help of which it was possible to abolish the lawful medieval state. Okay, and I don't see the medieval Rick state. Why does he say lawful? Is it Rick state? I'm not sure. And its hierarchy of offices based on acquired law. This concept of use, especially for Karl V and Ferdinand II, enforcing claims upon the German estates. Wherever the Jura Dominis is mentioned, an attempt is made to apply unlimited omnipotence to separate relations. In other words, an attempt is made to apply unlimited omnipotence to separate relations. So therefore, whenever this rule, the justice of rulers, the domination, the justice or right of the domination of the rulers, right? He says, an attempt is made to apply unlimited omnipotence to separate relations. Nevertheless, they remain, even for Klemperer, the same general entitlement to do whatever is demanded by the concrete situation. In other words, something by definition unlimited. Seemingly, the right of exception is still lawful because it appears to have a limitation in the exception itself. But in truth, the question of sovereignty is exactly the same as the one of Jura extraordinary, the extraordinary, the extraordinary anger. Extraordinary law. I was going to say the extraordinary rights, right? The rights of the extraordinary rights, the rights of extraordinary, same as the extraordinary rights. The state, shattered as it is by its estates and class struggles, as is the Constitution. The state, shattered as it is by its estate and class struggle, is its Constitution, by reason of its continuous state of exception in it. And its law is, to the core, the law of exception. Right? This is the law of exception is this ura extraordinary. Right? Whoever rules over the state of exception, therefore, rules over the state, because he decides when this state should emerge and what means are necessary. Therefore, in his Tacitus Posthumus, the imperial jurisprudence says that what is written in Linearis Capellanis is only related to the ordinary administration, normal administration, and is not binding for the emperor in the state of exception. It does not apply to the extraordinary potenas, extraordinary powers. And secondum, okay, this is the extraordinary powers, according to which it would be natural for the emperor to be able to act as necessity requires. Bissold illustrates this idea referring to the Emperor Friedrich, who outlawed Count Palatine. Freedom is a notorious rebel, and Count Palatine Friedrich as a notorious rebel, and transferred his election rights to someone else. Regardless of the prescribed procedure of the capitulations, it says, because there was no doubt that nothing else would do in the situation prevailing at the time. This is Christian Boehner's book. Christian Boehner, in this book, assumes that the supreme power was originally above ordinary powers, and that the epitome of extraordinary measures for the maintenance of the state in the cases of collusion, right, page 6. Nevertheless, he disagrees with the Caesarians, i.e. the imperial jurists, who granted the emperor supreme power above ordinary powers. See also the excursus on Wallenstein below, right? So therefore he has this Wallenstein chapter, the next chapter. So therefore, go back to here. He says that the exception, because derives the state, should emerge in what are the means of what is necessary. Right? Repeat. Whoever rules over the state of exception, therefore rules over the state, because he decides when the state should emerge and what other means necessary. Right? In the end, the nature of the law. Leads finally to the question of what the concrete situation, the lage is, what is the concrete situation is. Okay, this question towards the end of the nature of the law leads to the final question of what the concrete situation is. For private law, it would be possible to create some room for negotiations, provisional, precarious as it may be. So in private law, there could be room, but in the Cana literature, it is self-evident that private law has to be treated differently from public law. It would be unworldly naivete to apply considerations such as the equitas or equity, or ustica, justice, when which we confine in private law, the public law, where the salus publica prevails, the public good, the public safety, the public good. Um, what is decisive in public affairs, like martial law, diplomatic law, and the laws of offices, magistratus, or constitutional law, is not equitatis, not equity, but rather via the power of rulership, rather vis dominus, which is the forces of domination, or the power of rulership in the translator's view. In other words, alliances, soldiers, money. Okay, this is Capla Diaconus, books 4. Here is Capla's hierarchy of the different types of law. Natural law will be amended by the peoples, laws of peoples, the laws of peoples by military law, and military law by the law of diplomacy, the law of diplomacy by the civil laws. Therefore, in other words, natural law will be amended by the law of peoples, the law of peoples by military law, the military law by the law of diplomacy, and diplomacy by civil law. And this, once again, by a law that I call the law of the rulers or of the government. Right. This is the qua appello regena ses dominatus, the law of the rulers and government. He then characterized the quotation marks from Cicero: "Listen and obey." Whereas of military jurisdiction, Campar says, the supreme reason military jurisdiction is money. Serasius Linnaeus is outraged by the horrendous consequence of such a distinction between public and private law, which in fact identifies public law with reason of stat, raison d'etat, and public interest. See his Augustus, right? And otherwise counts as part of the arcane literature. Yeah, Linctius follows Machiavelli and Kepler in his view of dictatorship. Albecus Gentilis comments on his De Litigationibus. I think this is the lawmaker. Yeah, or of embassy, sorry, of legations. In his, in book 2, chapter 7, is characteristic. It is ridiculous to call a Turk a tyrant. Moreover, it is difficult to distinguish between a king and a tyrant. Therefore, the question to the extent to which the enemy, as a fighting party in civil war, must be treated according to martial law, will receive an answer similar to the one given respect to jurist in 1919. The outcome will decide. In other words, the 1919, the question of this thing, of the outcome will decide. So this is the Clapnas, the alliances, soldiers, and money. If everything depends on the concrete situation and upon the target that ought to be achieved, then the distinction between just and unjust becomes a useless formality. When it is not taken in by bywords of expediency or as an expression of the common understanding of justice and injustice. So in other words, it's basically the concrete situation. In other words, everything depends on the concrete situation and upon the target that has to be achieved. Then this, if that's the case, then the distinction between justice and injustice becomes a formality. When it's not taken as bywords for expediency, in other words, justice is expediency, or an expression of the common understanding. In other words, the people's whatever people understand as justice. So therefore, this is it's a justification. In other words, it becomes justification. It would be impossible not to refer in this instant to the clausus rebus sexentis, the conclusion these being the circumstances, right? These being the circumstances, which ought to be essential in public law. It says 33. This is Jacob Moltzer's book. I see it there, the representation of imperial magistrate, right? So, and most books supports the lost political power of the emperor with the help of conclusions about supreme power, right? Again, this is as a defender of the existing order of the estates, the the monarchomachians, opponents of monarchy, right? The monomachians, the opponents of monarchy, opposed the absolute reason of state by employing constitutional arguments. So the monarchomachians, the opponents of monarchy, right, opposed absolute reason of state by employing constitutional arguments, right? That's the idea. They wanted, as they said, to fight Machiavellian spirit. Janus Brutus, Dictator, this is all quotations of the Edinburgh editions. The Vindicatia has been chosen in the exemplary places of literature of the anti-monarchists, not just because it's a typical expression and an exemplary compulsion and summary of the whole body of literature of that kind of constitutional theory, but especially because of the monarchy can provide historical evidence that is based on a theology and moral theology, or like Hartmann and Buchanan on the German history of law. See Anathuas in the discussion of Rousseau in chapter 3 below, right? Althusis. Janus Brutus, the vindication contra tyrannus, the vindications against the tyrant. Like all other literature stemming from the eve of St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, Bartholomew's identifies the perfectus, the pestilia doctrina, the pestinalial doctrine. What does this mean? This is let's see what this means. Related to the trend of causing infections, right? Something that's plague-like or infectious. The infectious doctrine. Infectious doctrine. As a general enemy. In other words, this idea that tyrant, in other words, that this all like all literature stemming from Baton identifies this thing as an infection, disease, as the genuine enemy. It is in, and that is this idea of state, this idea of absolute rule, the reason of state, and the idea of the dictates of this of state of this, right, of the statecraft, of the rights of rulers. This is a pernicious doctrine, infectious, and this is the general enemy. It is interesting that, though, that dictatorship is barely named in the monarchic literature of the 16th century, although it appears frequently in the writers of the Arcana. So the Arcana is very interesting. The Arcana, people who write about the arcane, particularly, are basically reason of state theorists who are doing this, the readers of Rouge, and they do talk about it. But and remember, the monarchists, or people criticizing this literature of the reason of state argument, they see this as a pernicious doctrine, a disease that is the real enemy. That they don't really deal with this. He's saying that dictatorship is married, even though it feels frequently in the writers of. And Janus Brutus, who was the closest to the classical tradition, the absolutist priest is called a tyrant, despite the fact that this term was frequently used. That this term was frequently used to refer to Caesar, and is known and as it is known, his tyranny took the form of permanent dictatorship. Even though the Vindicator does not speak of it as such, it only praises Caesar for the fact that at least he asked the people and preserved the legal formalities. Urus pria praetaxim, the pretense of law. 36, the vindication for this. It was interesting that there's this defense of Caesar because he kept the pretense of law alive. What a tyrant is defined by the criteria of what justice is. The tyrant is either one who approximates power by force or evil machinations. Tyrannus. tyrant without title, right? This is without title, of tyrannus without title, of evil by force or evil machinations, or one who abuses the legality transferred dominion by violating the law and his own promises made under oath. This is the tyrant in excreto. Practice, a tyrant by practice. So let's go here next where we left off, right? This, in other words, made under oath, made, in other words, this is the difference of tyrant. The rightful exercise of office consists in the fact that the prince obeys the law sanctioned by the people, that is, the estates. The question, rex la ligue and leg regula princip, the king depends on the law, or the law depends on the king. All right. The question is, does the king depend on the law? The law depends on the king. Should a king depend upon the law? The law should depend on the king. Right. That's the question. Right. Thus, a very simple separation of powers into legislative and executive powers, whereby the law is the will of the people, and the people are represented by the estates. The prince, in his capacity as executor, governator, pilot, and curator, caretaker, a minister legis, servant of the law, and first minister of the state, supremus regi or fossifer, governs as an organum, an instrument of the law, but only as the body, not as the soul of the law, the body of the law, not the soul of the law. In other words, the prince is nothing but the executor, the thing who carries out these things of this. He's the body of the law, not the soul of the law. Even the decision to wage war or make peace is due to the people, whereas the administration of the law of war is the prince's business. So the administration is the prince's business. Apart from the prince, which mandates the rule to rule, there are other officers in governments, officii regni, the officers of the officers of the king, right, who are not just subjects or colleagues, consortes, colleagues of the prince. So therefore, there are other things who are not just mere colleagues of this, who have certain things to do, certain rules. Moreover, all actions of the prince should be under the control of the Senate, which is elected to oversee the king's interpretation of the laws and their implementation. Right? Again, this is the examinare of page 128 of Indicatia. That is, all those people who are mandated by the estates, the officiarii regni, those people, these officials, these. Let's go look at the officii regni. Officers of officials of the kingdom, all the officials of the kingdom taken together, represented more than the mandated king, who is just first among equals. Now, those of you study Germanic customs, this is more Germanic customs, how the Germanic princes did it in Germanic tribes. This is that way. This is, in fact, you see this in Montesquieu. If you remember reading Montesquieu Part 6, we talked about that, and about the German tribes, how the German tribes governed the prince and his retinue. This is very similar to what Julian Brutus is appealing to Germanic custom in one sense, right? So the king is who is just the first among equals. The illegitimate extension of powers of the prince's power usually starts with the fact that they marginalize those who have mandates from the estate and only summon them now to extraordinary committees, right? So therefore, there's a danger of this. People have legitimate power and legitimate authority subordinated to these other magistrates. He then only calls them on what he call, they marginalize them and only summons them for extraordinary elements, right? In the Vindicatia, another key element of the struggle reveals itself: the contradiction between the absolutist bureaucracy and those mandated by the estates. So there was the king's bureaucracy tied by the bureaucrats who tied with the king, and those that are mandated by the officials who are mandated by the estates. According to the text, the prince should also have officials, magistrates, officers, right? But their mandate ceases with the death of the king, whereas the officii ringella, these that public officials, right? These officials of the kingdom have retained their function. The king's mandatees are merely servants, servants in alliance, the servants in the alliance of this of precisely this institution. In other words, this is the idea here that the king's mandatees are just servants in the allegiance of this precise institution, the king. With this, the Vindicatio has in fact made a crucial point, but without being aware of it, because as will be shown in the next chapter, these severes, these slaves, as princely commissars, have abolished the lawful state of the estates. In other words, these actual these people who should be merely these officials of the officers of the king, who should serve only the alliance of that, not stay forever, that these abolished the lawful state of the estates of the Riksdag. Moreover, even the theoretical rationale of the vindication fails to realize a difficult problem that was present then, and through which it would have been possible for absolutism to justify itself anew. In the Vindicatio, the king is portrayed as the Ofarianus officer, and the people as the dominus master. The king should govern imperia. Let's do this imperia, which is to command, to govern or to command. But this means that he should care for the common good. And here, Janus Buddhist makes a reference to Augustine. The sole task of the king is the utility of the people, the welfare of the people, or the republic, yeah, of the state, the republica of the republic. In other words, of the utilitas of the people, or the utilitas of the republica. It is tacitly assumed as something self-evident that any form of public interest, such as law, is unequivocally and subject neither to doubt nor common sense. It is exactly here that a split occurred that separates the natural law of the 17th century, which was usually treated as a unified complex, into two different systems. So the law of the 17th century, which was treated as a complex, to two different systems. It is possible to phrase the opposition between them in terms of an opposition between the natural law of justice and the natural law of exact science, right? This is 37. Certain similarities, which are definitely not absolute identities, suggest a contradiction between justice and scientific methodology as parallel the contradiction that occurred in the 19th century between ethical, so-called natural law, and scientific socialism. However, it is a serious objection to Karl Bergham's explanation that he cut short the enormous wealth of ideas of the 17th century with the unmerciful and in no way clear yes, yes, no, no, to declare that as evil whatever transcends his own very complex and not all analyzed historical, relativistic, and positivist self-evidence. Not even a writer of Hobbes' stature could be protected from the verdict of the sentence quoted below. But of course, especially here, when Bergbohm discusses Hobbes, Spinoza, Locke, he becomes slightly unsure and talks about their uncertainty concerning the existence and non-existence of natural law. This is his criticism of other thinkers. The natural law of justice, as it occurs in the monarchas, the anti-monarchs, was developed by Grotius, right? This is Grotius develops natural law of justice by this. It assumes that a law with a certain context exists as a law prior to the state, whereas the scientific system of Hobbes is based on absolute clarity, on the axiom that there is no law prior to the state and outside of it, and that the value of the state resides precisely in the fact that it creates the law by settling disputes over what right is. Right, that's the whole idea. That's the difference. In other words, Grotius shows that there is a certain law that's above this prior to the state. Hobbes argues there's no law that's prior to the state. That the law that before the state there is no law. There is only and it is only through the existence of the state that law exists, and even or justice even exists. There's no right. Disputes over what is right. Therefore, the opposition between right and wrong exists only in and through the state. The state cannot do any wrong because any regulation can and only becomes law if the state makes it the content of an official staatlichen command, of an official command, and not because it corresponds to any ideal understanding of justice. Authoritas non vertamptant factus ligament. It is authority, not truth, that creates law. Leviathan, chapter 26. The law is not a norm of justice, but command, a mandate from the one who holds supreme power and therefore wants to command the future actions and members of the state. Hobbes's De Cive, book 6, chapter 9. A person is not guilty if the official judge has discharged him or her. So if it was not guilty, the judge has discharged it. The sovereign decides about what is mine and what is yours, and constitutes advantage and disadvantage, decency and indecency, right and wrong, good and evil. Again, a bid, De Cive, chapter 6, book 6, chapter 9. And he is the one to grant all honors and distinction before him are equal, be it individual like a monarchy or a crowd like in a democracy. Hobbes, Leviathan, chapter 19. Hence, no private conscience exists in a state. One ought to obey the official law. For everyone, the official law must be the highest moral obligation. It is repeatedly said that all private property comes from the state. De Cive, book 6, chapter 19, Leviathan, chapter 29. The difference between these two schools of natural law is best illustrated by saying that one system takes its start from the interest of certain understandings of justice, and therefore from a certain context of that decision, whereas for the other, the interest only consists in the fact that a decision as such has been made at all. So the Grotius system, the monarchist and the Grotius people, they do it from a decision that comes from what this is a school of thought that from an interest of a certain understanding of justice. A decision comes out of an interest of this, and therefore a certain context of a decision. Whereas what happens? A decision has been made, and that this decision, that in fact that a decision as such has been made at all, and therefore everything else comes from that. According to Hobbes, the sovereign defines what is beneficial and what is harmful for the state. And because human beings are motivated by their ideas of what is good and evil, or what constitutes an advantage and a disadvantage, the sovereign must also have the decisive power about the opinion of the people. Otherwise, there would be no sensation of struggle against everyone and everyone else, which is the very purpose of that the state which it is the very purpose of the state to put an end to. Right, De Cive, book 6, chapter 11. This is why, for Hobbes, the state is, by constitution, essentially a dictatorship. Since arising, it does not from a certain situation of bella armam contra arma, war of all against all. It has the goal permanently to suppress this war, which would immediately ensue whenever the pressures of the state on the people were released. The law, which essentially a command, is based on a decision related to the public interest. But the public interest only comes into being through the fact that the order has been given. So therefore, in other words, this idea that the order, that the state and creating of the order, this is therefore the interest only happens because there's an order here. The law comes out of an interest, but then what? That this interest is created by the fact that an order has been given that made this condition possible. Right? Again, the law which is essentially command, is based on a decision related to the public interest. But the public interest only comes into light through the fact that the order has been given. The decision contained in a law is, from the normative perspective, born out of nothing. In other words, it's normatively out of nothing. The decision contained in the law is normative, from a normative perspective, is out of nothing. It is, by definition, dictated. That's the idea of law in Hobbes, he says, Schmitt says. But the final consequences of this idea were only discovered by de Maistre when rationalism was shattered. For Hobbes, the power of the sovereign still rests on a more or less tacit and hence sociological, no less real agreement with the convictions of all citizens, even if these convictions should be initiated by the state. In other words, so that only with the destruction of reason, with de Maistre, is it purely the idea of a dictated will, a dictated act. But for Hobbes, there is this kind of sociological agreement between what the sovereign does and what the people do, in that sense. Sovereignty emerges from a constitutive act of absolute power made through the people. This calls to mind the system of Caesar and the sovereign dictatorship based on absolute delegation. At this point, in other words, when the question of content of the contract arises, there is an ambiguity in Hobbes. According to De Corpore Politico 2, 1, Section 2 and Section 3, and to De Civa 2, 5 and 6, the contract entails an enumeration by all for the benefit of the sovereign. This is therefore a devolution, a delegation from the people to the sovereign, as assumed in the Lex Regalia. But in Hobbes' system, it is more consequential not to assume devolution, but rather a constitution. In Leviathan, chapter 16 and 17, the creation of a representative organ is the essential context of the contract. Everyone acts as if the actions of the sovereign would be his own. That is, the contract constitutes the absolute representation, which every individual has to accept and grant as valid. The state emerges from this as a unity. There is something different from the delegations of a sovereign dictator, as its form for the basis of Caesarism, and it is not a lex regina, a law of reason. Is it lex regina? Let's do this. A royal law, so a law of the king. The diversity of contract of the state, the diversity of the contract of the state, the social contract in Hobbes, has been demonstrated by Frederick Goethe in his essay on the doctrines of the social contract, right? At Montpellier, Frederick Goethe. In fact, let's see if I did this right. Yeah, I did this right. So, therefore, in fact, the public interest does not depend on any public. The public interest does not depend on any public interest with respect to the content, but rather on the decision as what should be regarded as the public interest. It is also clearly marked in Pufendorf under the influence of Hobbes. Pufendorf knows that everyone claims, of course, to support only what is best for all, only public welfare, rights, and justice. But the question is, whose decision carries the day in the end, and by what authority? So everyone agrees to the end. The end is, of course, public welfare, but what is the public welfare? What is right? What is justice? Therefore, who decides this at the end of the day, and by what authority, right? The matter does not depend on the end, but rather on the decision about means to achieve these ends. The question is, who judges here? Who is the, again, the Latin right here. This is going to be, I think it's going to be different than translated. The decision to decide the means and safeties of the society. The power of judgment to determine the essential pertaining to health. Again, this translator. His Latin is horrible. The decision to decide on the means of the safety of society. In other words, healthy, safety, healthy. This is a weird translation. 39. This is Samuel Pufendorf on the laws of nature and the peoples, right? A state does not cease to be an absolute monarchy when at the moment of at the moment of coming to power, the prince promises to look after the welfare of the people and to support the good and punish the evil. So he makes the promise. This doesn't change the absolute power. For such a promise does not exclude the possibility of him being the one who decides on the means by which to achieve this end. So the fact that he swears to an end doesn't mean that it is going to be it ceases being an absolute monarchy, absolute ruler. A particular promise can nevertheless have different meanings, depending on whether it is a condition in terms of the conscience of the king or a legal requirement. From the point of view of conscience, he is always bound when he promises. For example, not to mandate any office to foreigners, not to raise new taxes, or anything like that. But at the same time, he is not bound by that promise if an institution is formed that the king has to consult whenever the concrete situation makes necessary a deviation from his promises. So therefore, I do this, I do this. In consequence, everything depends upon the state of exception. According to Pufendorf, each of the promises that are at stake in this discussion implies a tacit reservation that depends on the concrete situation. An exception must be made in the public interest. In other words, again, that in each situation, the promises that made in decision imply a reservation that if the concrete situation changes, exception must be made in the public interest. So when this happens, if the king remains the only one to decide, then he, despite all agreements, is the absolute master. Again, this is repeating from that text. This exception is always understood to be tacit, unless public safety, the highest law among these kind of things, commands. Or if the king declares that the safety of the people or some great benefit to the republic demands it. Just as the assumption always accompanied the acts of kings, the citizens have nothing to resort, for they lack the capacity to discern these matters, right? The theory of state that comes from the opposite camps of the estates denies interest in a decision as such and sees the people as an institution within which there can be no doubt about what is right and what is the public interest. It believes a common, unequal, and in other words, it believes in a common, equal, and unmediated conviction of all citizens. This becomes immediately evident in the English formulation. Locke, for whom all concrete powers are utterly irrelevant, where right is concerned, and who therefore advocates an unconditional right of resistance, has asked himself, who shall be judge? His answer, the people shall be judged. Treatise of Government, chapter 19, the last chapter of the book, in that sense, right? When, in order to ground this answer, he says that the people is the commissioner and that what is self-evident in private life should also be valid when the welfare of millions is at stake. And this sounds as radical as the sentence of Rousseau. Locke is as radical as Rousseau of this, right? Nevertheless, the radicalism and the opposition that comes from the estate must not be confused with that of Rousseau. The two parties share only the radicalism of justice, the separation of right from power, which has existed in all times. In other words, there's two parties that share in the radicalism of justice and the separation of right from power that is separate this. When it comes to political practice, their radicalisms are different. So therefore, political practice, they agree on that justice should determine this. Justice should guide this. Right should guide power. Not the right should guide what is dictated by reality. The reality should what is right in the situation or the dictate of this should be determined by justice, principles of justice. No absolute claim of that. But rather what happens is that the way you go about it is going to be in other words, when it comes to political practice, their radicalism is different. When the monarchists, the anti-monarchs, right, and also Locke talk about the people whose rights they defend against the prince, it is beyond the question that they do not mean either the plebs or the inconcorta and confusia turbata, the confused and disordered crowd. Okay, this is okay. this disorder to confuse crowd. But only the people who are represented by the organization of the estates. Okay, 41. This is Gurkha's Johannes Attes. So you know, despite the radical tone of some of the statements of Vindicatia, the phrase like populus, popularia, operatives, the people or the people's best class representatives. So this is that wonderful line. This is the in Vindication. The people of the populace, right? The people or the best, the people's best class representatives, prove that this work does not distinguish the people from their representatives. In other words, it doesn't. The people like the representatives are part of the people's representatives. The people or the people's best class or their representatives does not distinguish the people from the representatives. Only when a people appeared in an unmediated and disorganized mass, rejecting representation, did the new radicalism come to being. At the same time, this means that with Rousseau, another side of this new radicalism comes apparent. The concept of commission radicalizes what the government was given by the people, so that the government becomes the commissar of the people and can both be dismissed at any point in time and be subject to the people's discretion in an absolute way. But this theoretical development presupposes historical genesis, according to which the commissar plays an important role. The concept of commissar has been introduced in modern theory of the state by Baton. So now we stop here. We finish the discussion here, and we have to only get to the question of Baton's discussion of the commissariat. So here we stop the point. We finished part 2 of part 1A on dictatorship. We now turn the next time. We'll be turning to the definition of the commissariat dictatorship in Baton. The discussion about a continuation of this idea of in the dictatorship. If you like, if you please put in comments, questions, or issues you have. You might say, "Oh, you're reading it kind of bad." This is a very difficult book, and it's a very long book, and it's not divided properly as other Schmitt books are. So it's kind of like that's why I kind of divided it. I don't think I could have made a video together. This one, I had a meeting. I had a friend popping over, and I couldn't do this, and I'm just out of time. And now I'm out of time now too. So, well, if you have any comments, questions, please give it. If you like it, like the video, like it, share it with a friend, share it with someone else, get it out there. I understand we lost some, subscribe if you're not subscribed. If you didn't like it, you can say thumbs down, but say why in the comments. I can learn something from it. Maybe I can learn something from this and improve. Again, please subscribe to build a channel. If you share this on social media and share this channel for social media, maybe we'll get new people to grow the channel. You can follow me. If you want to follow me on social media, the links are below. Another thing to do is also my academic media, social media, the links are below. And if you want to help me to do what I do, you can becoming a member of Subscribe Star Patreon. Very little, like I think it's like $2 or $5, I don't know, a month, something like that. On Patreon or subscription. I'm not demanding, it's not demanding anything. It would be nice. No, I don't have any people joining it so far. I don't know if there's anyone there. I haven't been told. I have no members. No one wants to join me. I'm not popular. I don't have a big fan base. I don't have like 10,000 people watching me. So, okay, I understand. But if you want to help. Or you can buy one of my books and listen below. With that, I end. I'm sorry. This is the end of it. I'm going to try to do it. I'm going to be traveling soon again. My wife wants to go to see her mother, so I'm going to be traveling. And I might have to make videos at my mother's house. I don't like doing that, but we'll see what happens. Okie dokie. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.